I stealthily planted a kiss on her. The very next second, however, her eyes snapped wide open. I mentally drafted my own obituary, thinking my good days were officially over. But to my absolute shock, she looked at me with a soft, gentle expression and said, "Just one? Be a dear and give me another kiss, will you? Our names are basically acoustic twins. My name is Kaylin. Her name is Kaylin." During the very first massive lecture class of university, the scheduling gods decided to put us with the same professor. When the professor started taking attendance 2 minutes early, he called out her name first, Kaylin. This was the very first class of college, Ideological and Moral Cultivation. It was a massive combined lecture with students from several different majors crammed together. I had arrived ridiculously early and snagged a prime seat right in the middle. The classroom was already half full. With 2 minutes left on the clock before class officially started, the professor began the roll call. Hearing the name Kaylin, which sounded exactly like Kaylin to my nervous brain, I instinctively shot up like a startled prairie dog and shouted, "Here!" The old professor squinted at me, then glared down at his attendance sheet, his eyebrows knitting together in a storm of incoming rage. He was visibly ticked off. "First class of the semester and you're already hiring a substitute to answer the role? Were you planning to take her classes for the entire semester? The gender doesn't even match. Are you trying to pull a fast one on me?" The old professor looked absolutely heartbroken by this blatant disrespect, his tone turning as strict as a military drill sergeant. The collective gaze of the entire tiered lecture hall landed squarely on me, burning so hot it practically roasted me alive, turning my face the color of a freshly slapped tomato. Sporting a face that was already radiating heat, I moved my lips, desperately preparing to explain my tragic misunderstanding. However, suddenly, my gaze completely short-circuited. At the front door of the lecture hall, a slender silhouette made her grand entrance. White short-sleeve shirt, short skirt, knee-high socks, looking as fresh and sparkling as a morning dewdrop. It was Kaylin. Her voice was as sweet and energetic as a sugar rush, and her facial features were absolutely stunning. She practically vacuumed up the stares of every single guy in the room. "Professor, you can't go around falsely accusing people in broad daylight. I definitely didn't hire a substitute. Besides, looking at this little brother here, anyone can tell he's a straight-A student." Her tone carried a playful teasing as she bailed me out of my misery, yet it wasn't the least bit annoying. The old professor flipped through his attendance book and finally discovered my name. Realizing it was his own blunder, he apologized to me, constantly marveling at the fact. How on earth are there two names this strikingly similar in the same class? Kaylin walked right over toward my direction. I suddenly felt as if my respiratory system had gone on strike. My heart was pounding like a heavy metal drum solo. Kaylin casually sat down right next to me. "I reckon we were probably from the same family 800 years ago," she said. Her scent was way too close to me. Because of that single sentence, I actually almost backhanded my water bottle off the desk. With ninja-like reflexes, she grabbed the cup to steady it for me. "What are you panicking for?" The old professor probably noticed that I was squirming like a worm on a hot hook for the entire class, thinking it was his fault. So, right after class, he stopped me and Kaylin, offering to pay out of his own pocket to buy us some drinks. "Big sister will take little brother," he joked, and the ideological cultivation teacher actually started digging into his wallet. "No need, Professor, really, there's absolutely no need." I instinctively refused, waving my hands frantically. Kaylin just stood there, watching me and the old professor do the polite push and pull dance. Eventually, the old professor couldn't defeat my stubbornness and silently retreated back to his podium. "You kid, do you still get lucky money for the Lunar New Year?" Kaylin laughed from the sidelines. I froze, suddenly realizing my social faux pas a little too late. Wait, the professor originally said he was treating both me and Kaylin to drinks. I apparently didn't even consult her opinion before outright rejecting the offer on our behalf. I bit my lip. "Kaylin, how about I buy you a drink instead?" "Sure," she smiled. Her amber eyes looked like Highland lakes reflecting the most dazzling sunset. I packed up my backpack, and Kaylin asked if I had any other classes later, since after all, we weren't in the same major. I did have one more class, but I still had plenty of time to grab a drink. There was a small convenience store right downstairs in the academic building. Kaylin grabbed a pack of AD calcium milk. Maybe my staring at her was a bit too painfully obvious, because she turned around to look at me. "You want this too?" I had no choice but to nod like a bobblehead. So, she pulled another pack out of the fridge and shoved it into my arms. When it was time to pay, Kaylin physically blocked me from the register. Did you really think a big sister would actually take her little brother's money? Kaylin's popularity at our university was off the charts, which consequently dragged me, her little brother, into the spotlight as well. Her social skills were legendary, and she always had a squad of girls trailing around her. Sometimes when our different classes clashed during PE, the girls who were close to Kaylin would also follow suit and call me little brother. Occasionally, when Kaylin heard them, she would laugh and playfully scold them. "Who gave you permission to claim my relatives? We are all sisters here, so Kaylin's little brother is naturally our little brother too, right?" Kaylin would ignore their chatter, walk over and hand me a bottle of water. She randomly pointed at a few people in the crowd. "Take a good look. From now on, tell those specific ones to buy you water." I could only awkwardly chuckle along. Later on, the legend of me being Kaylin's little brother spread, so wildly it mutated. My name straight up evolved from Kaylin to Kaylin's brother. "I'm seriously so jealous of you, man. You just entered the school and immediately became the campus belle's little brother. Getting to worship that face from a close distance every day, just thinking about it makes me happy. My roommate sighed. I forced a smile, but an inexplicable, bitter wave of melancholy washed over my heart. Kaylin had known me for 3 days, everyone knew that. But what only I knew was that I had been head over heels in love with her for 3 years. Yes, I liked Kaylin. It started back in high school. Even getting admitted into this university was entirely because of Kaylin. Back in junior high, my grades were absolute trash. During high school, Kaylin practically became my spiritual pillar of support. In order to get into the exact same university as her, sleeping only 3 hours a night during my senior year became my default setting. I practically annihilated every single practice exam and mock test available on the market. By the end, the stack of finished workbooks was literally taller than I was. Sometimes, when I felt like I couldn't hold on any longer, I would psychotically scribble her name all over my draft papers, pressing so hard the pen almost broke through the desk, because the gap between me and her was just too astronomically huge. Nobody knew I liked Kaylin. I hid it flawlessly. The day I fell for Kaylin wasn't like some magical anime protagonist meet-cute scene. There was no golden cinematic sunlight pouring down. On the contrary, dark clouds were crushing the city. In junior high, I studied in a small town back in my hometown. When high school started, my dad's business blew up, so he brought me to the city. He paid a premium fee to jam me into the prestigious First High School. Because my house was close, I was a day student. Every day I had to take the 412 bus route to school. It was my very first day riding the 412. Because the bus stop I got on at was near the beginning of the line, I managed to score a seat. This route was heavily populated, and it happened to be peak grocery shopping hour, so the bus started getting insanely cramped. A grocery shopping auntie, armed with 2 giant stalks of lettuce and a dead fish, squeezed in. Whether intentional or not, the freshly slaughtered fish, despite being wrapped in a plastic bag, leaked its lovely, fragrant fish juice right onto my school uniform. I tried to shrink my legs further into the inner side of the seat, but that auntie just kept aggressively leaning into my personal space. I vaguely realized that she was doing it completely on purpose. I mentally rehearsed my lines several times before finally speaking up. "Auntie, your fish is rubbing against me." However, my vocal protest did absolutely nothing to stop her tactical assault. Instead, she started getting passive-aggressive and sarcastic, loudly complaining that I had 0 manners and didn't know how to give up my seat for an elder. The people around us all turned to stare, wearing classic none-of-my-business expressions. I was running a high fever that day and was slightly carsick on top of it. I felt absolutely miserable. But under the weight of those naked, judgmental stares, I felt like I wanted the floor of the bus to swallow me whole. Yet, just as I was about to surrender and stand up, a voice cut through. "Why should he give up his seat for you? If you want to be comfortable, pay for a taxi yourself. You certainly didn't look this frail when you were throwing elbows to grab discounted eggs at the market." And just like that, Kaylin spawned into existence. Even back then, she was already quite tall, and her icy expression was genuinely a bit intimidating. The auntie was clearly a bit rattled by her, but still relentlessly muttered a few more curses. Kaylin smoothly glided over to my side, resting one hand casually on the back of my seat. The cup of hot oatmeal porridge in her other hand mysteriously began to tilt at a dangerous angle. "Ah, are you getting carsick? Auntie, if you don't back up a bit, he might just decorate your entire outfit with his breakfast." My head was spinning, but I saw Kaylin winking furiously at me. I instantly understood the assignment and let out 2 dramatic, wet-sounding dry heaves. One look at me and the auntie's face turned a brilliant shade of green as she physically launched herself 2 meters away. Later, after we got off the bus, Kaylin laughed and said, "If I had known, I would have just dumped half the cup on her. Are you from out of town? Just now when I heard you speak, you didn't sound like a local." I blushed a deep red and nodded, assuming my accent was showing. But to my surprise, she said, "You sound really gentle when you speak. Not at all like the stinky, loud boys around me." At that moment, I had no idea that I would hold a massive grudge against those stinky boys around her for years to come. This city was great. Most people were good folks, just like me. Because of one single person, I felt like I had truly fallen in love with the city. I made it a habit to save Kaylin a seat in our ideological cultivation class. I was always ridiculously eager for Monday classes, so eager that even my roommate smelled something fishy. "Kaylin, you don't actually have a crush on that big sister of yours, do you?" My roommate was brushing his teeth in the corner, watching me pace back and forth trying to pick out an outfit. Instantly, the tips of my ears started burning. After all, my crush on Kaylin was a secret I had buried deep in my heart for years, perfectly accustomed to letting it hibernate in the darkest, sunless corners of my mind. "Don't talk nonsense. I only see her as a sister," I poorly defended myself. But my roommate saw right through my pathetic lie. "You didn't crawl out of the same womb. Kaylin, where exactly is this guilt complex coming from?" Having my deepest secret accurately sniped, I grabbed my backpack and fled to class like a fugitive. As per tradition, when I went to the cafeteria to buy breakfast, I grabbed an extra portion for Kaylin. She loved the freshly ground soy milk and the rose-red bean buns from Cafeteria 1. Kaylin had a habit of arriving exactly as the bell rang, but ever since I started bringing her breakfast, she would miraculously show up 5 minutes early. When I arrived at the door of the lecture hall, Kaylin and another girl arrived at the exact same time. I had seen that girl before. She was Kaylin's roommate. Kaylin naturally reached out and took my breakfast, making the girl next to her gasp dramatically. "Oh, our great beauty, how did you get so lucky in life? You just casually picked up a perfect little brother off the street. What, are you jealous?" Kaylin laughed, the golden morning sunlight hitting the curve of her pale ear perfectly, looking blindingly beautiful. Too jealous for words. The girl wasn't in our class, so she waved and left. Kaylin and I stood side by side in the hallway, munching on our buns. The ideological cultivation professor arrived too. Seeing the two of us, he decided to crack a joke. "The only reason a lazy bug like Kaylin gets to eat buns this early is entirely thanks to your little brother's hard work, isn't it? Isn't that obvious?" Because of the drama in the first class, the professor had gotten quite familiar with us. I smiled and greeted him. I was actually incredibly grateful to him. If it hadn't been for the misunderstanding in his class, we wouldn't have bonded. The professor walked into the classroom, specifically telling us to hurry inside once we finished eating. I agreed, but right as Kaylin took her first bite of the bun, she suddenly paused. Then, she lifted her gaze to look at me. "You ran all the way to Cafeteria 3 today?" I froze. Because my roommate had roasted me this morning, I was delayed a bit. By the time I reached Cafeteria 1, the rose-red bean buns were completely sold out, so I had to sprint all the way to Cafeteria 3 to buy one. Cafeteria 1 was on the way to class. Cafeteria 3 required a massive detour. I just didn't expect her to have the superhuman ability to taste the difference between cafeterias. I chewed on my bun, desperately trying to compute a logical response, but suddenly one of her fingers poked me right in the ribs. My entire body went rigid instantly. "Little brother, what are you so nervous about?" "I'm not." Thankfully, the warning bell rang, saving my life. She swallowed the last bite of her bun and pushed my shoulders, steering me into the classroom. Once we sat down, she suddenly leaned her head over. "Next time, you don't have to bend over backwards for me. I can eat literally anything." Turns out, she knew exactly what I was doing. Kaylin joined the university's volleyball team. They had training on weekends, and I frequently went over to watch her play. Kaylin's popularity was so insane that even I, the tag-along little brother, somehow became popular by association. The volleyball team was divided into a women's squad and a men's squad. Sometimes their training sessions overlapped. Since it was just practice and not an official match, I was the only spectator in the indoor stadium. I sat there with my sketchbook, drawing. Even though it was just line art, anyone could tell at a glance who the protagonist was. I was always used to putting her at the dead center of my focus. The captain of the volleyball team came over carrying a case of water to distribute, and even handed me a bottle. "Thanks," I said. After the captain left, a few guys from the men's team strutted over. The one leading the pack was wiping sweat with a towel. That was the men's team captain, and the guy next to him was Thaddeus. "This senior girl is really something. Our volleyball team has a limited budget, you know. If we give a bottle of water to every single guy who comes here to simp over her, the team is going to go bankrupt." Thaddeus sneered with maximum passive aggression. Holding the bottle of water, I felt incredibly awkward and flustered. Usually, I brought my own water, but I just happened to forget it today. "Then, I'll go buy a bottle later and return it," I said softly. I was never the type who was good at arguing with people anyway. Kaylin was still on the court, but Alara heard the commotion and came to my rescue. "It's just one bottle of water. Besides, Kaylin's little brother isn't exactly an outsider." Thaddeus shot me a look of pure disgust. "What's all this sister-brother crap? He clearly has ulterior motives." Almost everyone on the team assumed I was Kaylin's actual biological brother, but Thaddeus somehow knew I wasn't. He just assumed I was another random guy chasing after Kaylin. "What's going on?" Kaylin walked over, demanding answers. She was taking a sip of water, but her eyes were locked onto me. Looking at Kaylin, I suddenly felt incredibly safe. Though honestly, Thaddeus wasn't exactly wrong. I did have ulterior motives when it came to her. Kaylin lowered her water bottle. "What happened?" he said. I drank the team's water. Kaylin's eyebrows instantly pulled together into a sharp frown. She glared at Thaddeus, her gaze turning dark and threatening, then turned to Alara. "From now on, I will personally order the team's water, and I will pay for my little brother's share out of my own pocket." Thaddeus's face instantly went through a whole spectrum of colors, red then green. Kaylin grabbed my wrist and dragged me out of there. Her warm touch was so distinct, making my heart rate spike alongside my body temperature. Kaylin told me to wait right there for a minute. She had forgotten something back in the gym. I waited in that exact spot for about 10 minutes, and when she didn't come back, I went looking for her. Just as I reached the volleyball court, I heard Kaylin's voice laced with absolute ice. "Someone looking like you actually has the audacity to talk trash behind people's backs? Maybe take a good look in the mirror before you start spewing garbage. And whatever is going on between me and him is none of your damn business. You have zero right to judge. Just stick to playing with yourself." The entire gym went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Being humiliated by Kaylin so publicly, Thaddeus looked like he wanted to evaporate. The men's team captain finally spoke up. "Kaylin, don't be so harsh. Thaddeus only said that because he likes you. He probably thought pulling the 'he has a crush on you' card would diffuse her anger." But to everyone's shock, Kaylin just coldly snapped. "What does that have to do with me?" It was only later that I found out the whole incident started because Thaddeus was salty and was trash-talking me behind my back to the guys. Unfortunately for him, Kaylin had walked back in and caught him red-handed. Kaylin exploded on the spot. Kaylin normally had a great temper. Alara even mentioned it was the very first time she had ever seen Kalin get that furiously angry. After that, Kalin took me out to eat at a little restaurant tucked away in an alley. The food was incredibly good. I was shoveling rice into my mouth while covertly sneaking glances at her. I would have never dared to do this before. I was terrified that if she found out, I would even lose my privileges as her little brother. But today she had stood up for me, shielding me without a second of hesitation. It made me a little bit arrogant. Am I really that good looking? If you keep staring, you're going to shove that rice right up your nose. Who says I was staring at you? Try this. This place is my secret treasure trove. I don't just share it with average people, you know? A sudden wave of euphoria washed over me. So you're saying I'm not an average person to you? I finally mustered up every ounce of my courage to be brave just this once. But right at that exact moment, Kaylin spotted an acquaintance and walked over to say hi. When she came back, she looked at me. What were you about to say earlier? Nothing. Kaylin didn't push the issue, but mentioned that she had just seen a ridiculously tall guy, guessing he had to be over 190 centimeters. I was suddenly violently reminded of the time Kaylin laughed at me on the bus, genuinely thinking I was a fresh middle schooler. She had forcefully escorted me all the way to the middle school department's gate. Back then I was notably shorter than guys my age, which gave me a massive complex for the longest time. Even though I had finally hit a respectable 187 centimeters, remembering that dark history made me fiercely shovel 3 extra massive bites of rice into my mouth. Who knows, maybe at my age I could still squeeze out another 3 centimeters. A week later our university's military training began. Kaylin and I weren't in the same platoon. Fortunately, my drill instructor wasn't too tyrannical, but the weather was ridiculously hot. I did a ton of research on forums beforehand and prepared a care package of military training survival gear for Kaylin. Turns out, Kaylin had prepared one for me too. The night before training started, Kaylin brought me late-night snacks after her volleyball practice. She handed me a massive bag of essentials. I couldn't help but snicker, feeling absolutely overjoyed. I actually prepared a set for you too, I said. Oh wow, you even know how to pick out sunscreen and gel insoles? Kaylin looked genuinely surprised, but happily accepted my gift bag. Kaylin was very pale, the kind of person who never tanned. Considering how much she loved sports, it was a genetic blessing that made everyone violently envious. However, even though she didn't tan, she did sunburn. During our high school military training, she got scorched. I saw the sunburn on her neck, a massive patch of skin that turned beet red and eventually peeled. Back in my sophomore year of high school, I had secretly bought a tube of burn ointment and left it on her desk. We weren't in the same class, so to avoid getting caught, I lied and claimed I was suffering from heat stroke. The instructor let me go back to the classroom to rest. I snuck into Kaylin's classroom like a highly trained burglar. My heart was practically lodged in my throat as I placed the ointment on her desk. But just as I was about to escape, I heard footsteps echoing in the hallway. I heard them talking about Kaylin. In a sheer blind panic, I dove right behind the door of her classroom. My entire body was trembling like a leaf. I can't even describe that chaotic mix of terror and adrenaline. It felt like all the blood in my body had rushed straight to my skull. The most terrifying part was when someone suddenly yanked the door open. It was Kaylin herself. Her desk happened to be right next to the door. Behind the door was the broom closet corner. She was wearing her camo pants and rubber training shoes, but I recognized her instantly. I was trapped with nowhere to run, and the space behind the door was already suffocatingly tight. Add her physical proximity into the mix, and I felt like I was literally going to asphyxiate. But then, suddenly, the crushing pressure eased up. Turns out, she casually kicked her chair forward a bit, carving out just enough extra breathing room for me. "Let's go," Kaylin suddenly announced. And just like that, the group slowly shuffled out with her. The noise faded away, leaving me slumped against the wall, drained of all energy and dripping with cold sweat. I never knew if she actually noticed me hiding back there that day. But later on, I saw the exact tube of ointment I bought, sitting in the lost and found box. Brand new. She never used it, and I never claimed it back. Whatever happened to that ointment after that was a mystery. This time around, I slathered on the sunscreen Kaylin bought for me, and aggressively chugged from the pump-action water bottle she provided. Maybe it was karma finally catching up with me. Back then I faked a heat stroke, but this time I actually got a real one. While standing at attention in the scorching sun, I thought I could just tough it out. But suddenly, my vision went completely pitch black and I face-planted directly into the dirt. Right as I completely lost consciousness, I heard someone screaming my name. Amidst the chaotic blending of voices, I effortlessly pinpointed Kaylin's voice. When I woke up, there was an IV needle jammed into the back of my hand. Kaylin was sitting right next to my bed. I heard her aggressively interrogating the doctor. "Why isn't he awake yet? Are you sure there isn't some underlying brain damage besides the heat stroke? He's perfectly fine. He's just asleep. If you shake him, he'll wake right up." "Oh," Kaylin replied. "Kids sure can sleep." For some reason, I actually detected a hint of fondness in her teasing tone. I was awake. I opened my eyes and looked at her. Seeing me awake, Kaylin immediately slapped her hand over my eyes. "Nope, you're not awake. Go back to sleep so I have an excuse to slack off training a bit longer." Seeing how serious she sounded, I nodded and obediently squeezed my eyes shut again. However, I could hear her muffled chuckling. Just as I was about to open my eyes to complain, she leaned in and whispered softly right next to my ear, "Go to sleep. I'll stay right here and guard you." I ended up sleeping all the way until dusk. When I finally woke up, the evening clouds outside the window looked like a glorious disaster of gold, magenta, and indigo, like some beauty guru had dropped their favorite eyeshadow palette. Kaylin wasn't in the room. She had probably gone back to training. Just as that thought crossed my mind, a slender, elegant hand pushed the curtain aside. Kaylin walked in, carrying takeout boxes in her other hand. "You really can sleep like the dead, huh?" She sat down on the edge of my hospital bed and unpacked the food onto the table. "You're the one who explicitly told me to sleep," I retorted, throwing the blanket off and sitting straight up. Maybe it was because I had been horizontal for too long, but a violent wave of dizziness hit my brain. I blindly reached out and grabbed onto Kaylin's shoulders for support. Seeing that my operating system was crashing, Kaylin smoothly wrapped one arm around me, pulling me in to lean against her. She must have rushed straight over from training because her skin still radiated a toasted, sun-baked warmth. Naturally, my heart immediately abandoned all sense of rhythm. "Still dizzy? Hold on a sec, I'll go grab the doctor," she said, genuinely looking like she was about to sprint down the hallway. "I'm fine, really. Probably just a bit of low blood sugar." Only then did she drop the emergency protocol, opening the takeout boxes and watching me eat like a hawk. Kaylin seemingly hadn't noticed my internal panic attack. Seeing my ears turning red, she just assumed I was hot and grabbed a little plastic fan a nurse had left behind to cool me down. Aside from my spectacular heat stroke, the rest of the military training was utterly unremarkable. Although Kaylin was chosen as the flag bearer for the platoon right next to mine, it wasn't a shocker at all, but I still mentally gave her drill instructor 5 stars for having excellent taste. Because of this arrangement, she stood right at the very front of the neighboring formation, meaning I could stare at her with zero effort. Kaylin had a tall, elegant posture. Even that dreadful potato sack camo uniform somehow looked like high fashion on her. She practically glowed. But now, every single day before assembly, Kaylin would march over with a vial of Huoxiang Zhengqi liquid, that absolute biohazard of a traditional herbal medicine, and stand there, enforcing that I drink it to prevent another heat stroke. That stuff smelled atrocious and tasted even worse. Every time, I resisted like a toddler. "Do I have to drink it?" I didn't even realize it myself, but my tone sounded exactly like a boyfriend whining to his girlfriend. Unfortunately, whining had a 0% success rate against Kaylin's anti-heatstroke regime. She was an absolute dictator about it. The medicine was genuinely revolting. But seeing Kaylin go out of her way to feed me this vile liquid, suddenly it didn't taste quite so bitter anymore. The best part of military training was the evening sing-offs. After the platoons aggressively screamed marching songs at each other, there was time for individual talent shows. People sang, people danced, the vibes were immaculate. Kaylin was heavily peer-pressured by her platoon into performing. She didn't act shy at all. She grabbed the instructor's megaphone and sang Jay Chu's Blue and White Porcelain. Her voice was genuinely incredible. A ton of guys and girls whipped out their phones, turning on their flashlights to create a makeshift concert ocean for her. Youth is probably exactly like this. Some people are born to sing and dance in the spotlight, grabbing every chance to shine brightly, terrified of letting the moment slip through their fingers. After Kaylin finished singing, quite a few guys were still aggressively gossiping about her. But the most explosive moment of the night was when a guy from Kaylin's own platoon stood up and sang, "Like You," publicly confessing his love to her in front of everyone. A summer night, listening to someone else publicly declare their love for the person I liked. My heart felt like it had been soaked in lemon juice, but mostly, I was just intensely jealous. Someone actually confessed! The field erupted into absolute chaos. But Kaylin didn't respond at all. The people in her platoon looked around wildly, only to realize the VIP of the moment had vanished. Her instructor finally remembered that Kaylin had asked for permission to go to the bathroom. With the main character missing, the hype quickly died down. Someone else started dancing and the crowd's attention shifted. About 10 minutes later, I felt someone tugging on the back of my shirt. I looked back. It was Kaylin. "Follow me." My spot was already in the dark shadows at the back, and everyone else was watching the performance, so no one really noticed us sneaking off. Still feeling guilty, I lied to my instructor that I needed to hit the restroom. I sprinted over to Kaylin. She was standing under a massive banyan tree, happily biting into an ice cream cone. In her other hand, she held a completely untouched one. It was from that brand new shop off campus that always had a line stretching into the next zip code. Then I remembered. This morning, Kaylin